difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up, live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these self-evident that all men are created equal. I have a dream
So help me God. And the first decision the President made after establishing the Space Force was deciding who should be its first leader. And I was around when the President made that decision, and I can tell you, he never hesitated. He knew right away there was no one more qualified or more prepared from a lifetime of service than General J. Raymond to serve as the first leader of the Space Force.
We will build this new service in a way that strengthens our joint force and allows us to move with the speed and agility needed to respond to the current strategic environment. Once built, the Space Force's measures of success will be that our adversaries are deterred and that our joint and coalition partners always have the space capabilities that our modern way of war and our modern way of life depend on.
GPS. In the 21st century, it's become a part of our daily lives. It's how we get from point A to point B. It's how we find a new restaurant and keep track of where we've been and where we're going. There was once a time when we could navigate an excursion with a map and compass, but today, for many of us, without GPS, we'd be lost, and without the United States Air Force, we wouldn't have GPS. It's widely known that the Air Force flies F-16s, C-130s, and B-2 bombers around the globe, but many people are unaware that the Air Force also flies another fleet of vehicles at higher elevations than these planes could ever go, so high, in fact, that they're outside of the Earth's atmosphere. They're not vehicles in the traditional sense, there's no pilot inside, and their mission is not to transport goods or attack an enemy. Their job is to transmit information, and when it comes to warfighting capabilities, information is king.
You want to get the higher ground always, and that's been since forever in battle, obviously. So space is the next highest ground above air.
Whether you're a Marine in Afghanistan trying to be on the top of the hilltop to have position over your enemy, or you're like us and you're trying to have the satellites up in space to have a viewpoint of the Earth, space is the most important forefront.
40 years ago, when space was pretty new and Sputnik was the only thing up there, it didn't seem like it was going to be as much of a big deal as it is.
In 1957, the Soviet Union launched the first satellite, known as Sputnik, into space. Scientists at Johns Hopkins University noticed that the frequency of radio signals transmitted by Sputnik increased as it approached and decreased as it moved away. This was caused by the Doppler effect, which is what alters the sound of a car as it speeds by. The scientists had an idea that they could track their distance from a satellite by measuring the frequency of the radio signals. In the 1960s, the United States military began working on the Global Positioning System, which was based on this concept. It became fully operational in 1995 and today is controlled by a small group of airmen from a tiny room in Colorado Springs, Colorado.
It's kind of funny listening to how people think GPS works. My mom thinks I send, commands to her telling her to turn left and turn right, which is really not what happens. And it is kind of amazing. You have 19-year-olds who are commanding multi-million-dollar satellites, but it speaks to our training and it speaks to our operations here is that we ensure that our guys can actually take care of the satellites and the constellation.
People that aren't associated with GPS don't really think of it as a satellite constellation. They think of it as maybe something that's ground-based or built into their phone. And they don't understand that there are 40 satellites orbiting the Earth that provide these signals.
Of these 40 satellites, around 30 are always active, and there are at least 4 satellites visible no matter where you are on the planet. Each satellite transmits information about its position and current time at regular intervals, and your GPS receiver uses this data to calculate how far away each satellite is from you, thus determining your exact location within a few meters.
We advertise less than 3 meters. We do get better than that. We are usually a lot better than that.
I think there's an immense amount of pride. Just being able to wake up and say, I support 4 billion devices, it's kind of a big deal.
Where else can you tell your mom, your grandma, I'm helping 4 billion people every day, and I'm operating satellites that are 20,000 kilometers away from Earth.
We have signal over everywhere. And I know people may say like, oh, well, my GPS receiver doesn't get signal. That's more on the receiver's end.
The signal that we provide to civilians is awesome. It's just as good as the military signal.
I've heard a number of different misconceptions about GPS. One, let me just clear up the myth that it doesn't matter how close you are to a military facility, that is not going to improve your GPS signal.
Another is that GPS can track you. It cannot.
We have people, contacting our user ops section be like, my GPS doesn't work, and it's like, that's your receiver. The GPS signal is pristine, I promise you. It's accurate.
The GPS mission at Schriever Air Force Base is one of several jobs that airmen in this career field can do. They all have different reasons for becoming a part of this highly classified vocation, but now that they're in it, many would say that their contribution to the Air Force, the country, and the planet is unparalleled.
When I decided to join the Air Force, I wanted to do a cool job. I didn't want to just go in open and say, give me whatever job you have available.
The day I talked to the recruiter for the first time, my question was, how do I become a pilot? And he said, oh, it's really hard. Here's these jobs.
My first career field was AC-130U gunner, and I had significant air sickness in that training. The air sickness was very detrimental to my health, and I was also given an opportunity to do another profession and do it well. The Air Force gave me that opportunity, and I got space operator.
So space systems operations, it's one of those things that you read it and you're like, that sounds awesome. You don't really know what it is. I put it down on my dream sheet. I wasn't expecting to become a space systems operator.
When I went in to see a recruiter, I asked him, what can I do with space? He showed me this job, and he said that the odds of me getting it were pretty slim. They weren't letting too many people in, and I love what I do every day, and I don't really know too many people that do what we do that don't love it.
Like a foreign signal that's I think it's pretty cool. That's just that I'm dealing with something that's a lot bigger than myself.
When you work in a building all day long and there's no natural sunlight, there's no windows, there's nowhere to go, you really get to know each other, and that helps build some really, really strong relationships.
Everybody is aware of the impact that we make every day. I think that kind of brings us together.
Only an hour down the road from Schriever, airmen at Buckley Air Force Base also perform a mission that affects billions of people around the globe. Unlike GPS, however, their mission is much less known, but no less important.
When I found out I got the job, I tried looking it up. And we work in a world of classified information, so it was really hard to find out what we do as space systems operators. And part of that is because the mission's different everywhere. If I were to work for GPS or for the Weather Service, I would have a completely different mission. Here I work missile warning, and I support a warfighter mission.
Space operators at Buckley Air Force Base in Denver, Colorado spend night and day watching computer monitors, but they're not checking their email or making Excel spreadsheets. These highly skilled airmen are constantly searching the entire globe for heat.
What our satellites do is they're kind of like telescopes, and you can see the amount of heat that's coming off one of these missiles and be able to differentiate them from, say, the exhaust coming out of your car.
We report on every missile that we see to troops downrange and to civilians downrange so they can duck and cover.
Missiles are proliferating around the world. It is a significant threat to the United States, our allies, and our forces. And missiles are getting more accurate, more lethal than they ever have before.
The Defense Support Program, or DSP, has been in use for over 40 years, and the Air Force continues to squeeze more and more information from satellites that have been in orbit for longer than some of the young space operators controlling them have been alive.
These spacecraft have a design life of 5 years. But now some are old enough to drink. They're, it's 23 plus years old. And these have been providing, no kidding, data and been doing active work for the United States Air Force for decades.
We have the DSP satellite here, but if you looked at our follow-on Block 10, our SBIRS GEO satellite, it looks nothing like this. The Block 10 guidance is so different and so new that we're sort of venturing into an area that really is new to the United States military and the DoD as a whole.
The old system was very basic, and our new systems will be much more capable.
They can see a lot more, they can do a lot more.
With the onset of our new capabilities, we are able to see dimmer objects, so it doesn't require the heat that is normally associated with the tail end of a missile. We are in the midst of a once-in-a-generation time frame within this mission set. Moving forward, OPIR, Overhead Persistent Infrared, will become more and more common, and I'm convinced that across the Air Force, people will use that as much as they use the term GPS.
You see the airmen that are coming in now, and it truly is exciting to watch them. Some of our 18, 19, 20-year-old airmen are some of the smartest people I have ever seen, and they just get it. And they're just excited, and they want to make a contribution, and they're pushing the mission faster and farther than we've ever done before.
The Combat Development Division was an idea that started with General Davidson. General Davidson is special because he is literally a special tactics officer from the special operations community who had at his disposal things called Combat Development Division. It's a way for warfighters to very quickly get capability that they need to navigate the very complex contested environment that they face. If we are going to call ourselves a United States Combatant Command for Space with a Combined Force Space Component Command, with the 14th Air Force service leading 90% of the forces presented to U.S. Space Command, then we should also have those warfighting units that help us with getting that capability to our operators' hands as quickly as possible so that we can maintain that advantage. Most of the people entering into the service today, between 18 and 25, are already digitally native. The DoD is now caught up to that with the first ever DevSecOps compliant platforms being released over the last couple weeks. And so we intend to be some of the first people producing DevSecOps compliant applications. What that really means in plain terms is that technically speaking, there is now a capability for operators to discover something that they need, an application to support whatever workflow they have, to develop a prototype to do it, something really basic, a minimum viable product, maybe just a button that automatically does one thing, and deploy that to a fully accredited platform with an authority to operate within hours. Right? This used to take half a year, 2 years to do. And now we're about to deploy our first applications. So there's this thing called Space Pitch Day, which we're using to basically hire third-party developers who are already used to platform as a service and infrastructure as a service and developing cloud-native applications. We're gonna hire them, work with them, let them know what we need. They're going to develop that code for us very quickly, and now we can deploy it very quickly too. And then based off of how that plays out, right, we're expecting some failures, we're also expecting some wins. We go from there and we kind of adjust on the fly, which is the agile way of doing things.
Hey Mike, what's up? Those are some great questions, Mike. Why are we here? What is our purpose? You know what? Let's find out together.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Blueprint Leadership Podcast. I'm Kay Wright, your 18th Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force. You all know the drill. We talk to some of my favorite people and we discuss all things leadership. Now, our goal is to provide insights for up-and-comers to help find their path and reach their leadership potential. We call it Blueprint, but there's no one way to lead. We want to share our experiences, give advice, and hopefully we can help you find your path and reach your potential as a leader.
From the time you're born, you're never alone. Someone is always by your side. Family, friends, teachers, strangers. Those to your left and to your right. What I have realized is that the older you get, the more choices for company you have. And those whom you choose as your company will shape the course of your life.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Blueprint Leadership Podcast. I'm Kay Wright, your 18th Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force. You know the drill. We talk to some of my favorite leaders from across the world, and we discuss all things leadership. Now, our goal is to provide insights, tips, and ultimately to help us help up-and-comers find their path and reach their leadership goals. We call it Blueprint, but as we all know, there's no one way to lead. We want to share our experiences, give advice, and hopefully we can help you find your path and reach your potential to be the greatest leader that you can be. Now, our guest for today is someone who I grew up in the Air Force with. We started our command chief real leadership journeys at the same time. He is a warrior who started off in the Air Force as a PJ, a pararescue jumpman. He's worked with special forces in all different agencies, a combat veteran. He's been a command chief at multiple levels. It is an honor to have him here with us. He is a personal friend of mine and someone that I've relied on for advice, guidance, and mentorship for many, many years. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our SEAC number 4, the Senior Enlisted Advisor to the Chairman, number 4, CZ Ramon Colon Lopez. Hey, man, thanks for being here with us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Really an honor to be here.
Yeah, it's good. It's good to have you. Now, our listeners might remember from our first show, you actually called in. So you're actually, man, our first return guest.
Yeah, I am.
Yeah, thank you. It was good. The first show we talked to SEAC number 3, and we had you call in, and that was a really good show. It's been received real well. Hey, let's jump right into some leadership stuff. Tell me about your leadership journey, man. How'd you get here? How'd you become the first airman to become the SEAC?
Well, it all starts with my desire to join the armed forces, and that desire at the time was just to get the hell out of Bridgeport, Connecticut.
Yeah.
Didn't really have a charted path per se. But I quickly realized, and my sister reminded me of this, that I sent her a letter from basic training when they made me a squad leader at the time, that told her that leadership position really fulfilled my needs of being in service. So I guess that was the first indicator that I had a passion for leadership. Then I became a transportation specialist, did that for a few years, almost acted my way out of the Air Force during that tenure. And somebody had the right idea that we should make this young man a pararescue man. He's got too much energy. Yeah. And that was when everything came together. That was the defining moment in my life to where I realized that I wanted to serve 30 years, that I wanted to be a chief in the Air Force, and that I just wanted to continue to serve.
Yeah. Could you ever see yourself when you were a young transportation specialist or when you first became a PJ, did you ever see yourself being the most senior enlisted person in the whole United States Department of Defense?
Well, I think if you were to ask my supervisors at the time, much like you, they will give you a different story. Yeah. But no, I think that we're a product of the people that are around us. And like I stated during my swearing in, it's all about the company you keep, the people to your left and to your right. And I have been fortunate enough to have a lot of good teachers to help me carry on with my duty.
Yeah. So speaking of good teachers, any particular mentors or folks that stand out in your career that helped you along your leadership journey?
Yeah. So I call this 4 gentlemen the Mount Rushmore of leadership. And obviously it's Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force number 5, Bob Gaylor, whom I had the honor to meet early on when I was a senior airman. Jim Binnicker, Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force number 9. He was another one that I met later in my life, but clearly helped me shape my leadership style by looking at the general purpose side of things and not the special operations side. I had my first wing commander who selected me and took a huge risk, General now AFSOC Commander Jim Slive. And obviously Chief Master Sergeant retired Wayne Fisk, who grabbed me as a young pararescue man right about in the same time that Chief Gaylor came into my life and just not taught me how to be a warrior and be a gentleman.
Yeah. So so clearly you've had at least 4 mentors and folks that have helped you along your journey. What advice would you give to young up and coming leaders in our armed forces about the power of mentorship or how to go about finding a good mentor?
Hey man, silver bullet number 1. If you want to fly with the eagles, don't hang around with the turkeys. You eventually become the company that you keep. And I think it's imperative to pay close attention to the people that are around you, good or bad. Learn from the good ones, also learn from the bad ones, and then continue to emulate those attributes that you value, and continue to be the change that you want to see.
Yeah, but how do I go about finding a mentor? Should I just go up and ask someone, "Hey, SEAC, would you be my mentor?" I mean, what do you think? Especially, our generation of airmen now that may not be as comfortable with that face-to-face interaction. What would you recommend?
Well, talking about the face-to-face interaction, I believe that, many people shy away from it. But one thing that I know for sure is that a lot of them are reading. They're reading posts, they're reading tweets, they're reading content online. And if they read something from someone whom they want to learn more, I highly recommend that they reach out to them electronically if they want to. For me personally, I'm open to anyone contacting me, which happens on a daily basis. And that is because they either read something that I wrote in the past, or they recently found out about, who I am by position or so on. But I've always kept the door open for that reason, because the 4 gentlemen that I mentioned earlier, that's exactly what they did for me, and it's my time to pay it back.
Dude, so first of all, nobody recently found out who you are. Everybody knows CC. But you did mention earlier Silver Bullet, and you mentioned just a second ago, people have read things that you've written, and so you're pretty famous for your leadership series titled Carnivore Leadership. And tell me, where does that come from, and what motivated you or got you writing about leadership in that way? How many episodes did you, or what do you call them?
Volumes.
Yeah.
I did 5 of them.
5, yeah.
And so they started when I was the command chief at the 1st Special Operations Wing, but I have to walk you back prior to that assignment, because I didn't have any desire to be a command chief. And it just so happens that at an award ceremony, Chief Roy was talking to General Wooster, the AFSAC commander at the time, about the potential of getting some special tactics, now special warfare airmen, in the command chief ranks. When he approached me and asked me, I basically told him to pack sand. I didn't have any interest in doing it. And
you told Chief Roy that?
Yes.
The Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force?
Yes.
Number 16?
Number 16. Right. Fairly large man.
Yeah.
But, and I had a relationship with him, so I was pretty comfortable talking to him. But he explained that, there's certain attributes from the special operations community that are much needed to be able to lead in combat today. And he was also concerned about what was going to happen 10 years from that date when it comes to the pressure on the force, because combat was going to continue to happen, and he had seen it during his tenure, which is something that you're dealing with right now. But when he brought up that comment about we need something different when it comes to leadership, I went ahead and called the Mount Rushmore of leadership, and I asked their opinion. So should I leave the pararescue ranks to become a command chief? And unanimously they said, yes, you have to do this, because Wayne Fisk specifically quoted Paul Airy, said, never pass up an opportunity to pay back the institution that made you who you are.
Yeah.
So Wayne told me, you have to pay back the Air Force. So when I got in the seat, I had my initial conversation with General Slife, and we started talking about what was it that he needed to get done leadership-wise. And he's told several stories, which we will not get into in this podcast. But the one thing that he mentioned was that the airmen needed some different kind of motivation, and that this was a war-fighting wing, and I needed to go ahead and bring their focus back from the daily gripes and complaints to a wartime focus. When I met with some of our fellow chiefs, I got to see that it was pretty much, the mouthpiece of reading whatever the Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force was putting out, whatever was in Air Force Times. And very few had original thoughts about things. And the other thing that I noticed is that few or none of them were talking about their candid personal, opinion or views on the subjects that were near and dear to the airmen. So I took a chance and I wrote the first one. And it was very positive feedback, because like about time somebody starts talking from the trenches. So the second one came out at the time to where we were we were thinking about redoing the EPRs, and then the whole fitness issue came into play. So I started writing on the subjects that they had the most interest. And since I'm not a social media guy, I wasn't putting that on Facebook, or I think MySpace was.
Probably, yeah.
But I decided to just put it in papers, and then I disseminated it to the wing. And then we had conversations about that to provide a little bit deeper context. But up to this date, I have airmen writing back saying, hey, can you tell me a little bit more about this paper, what you wrote? But yeah, that's where they came about.
Well, I tell you, man, it's been a great success. I first, you may have disseminated it to your wing, but it spread across the Air Force pretty quickly. I think I was in my first maybe a few months as a command chief, somebody started sending them to me, and I thought, wow, man, this is some really good stuff. So, and it stood the test of time because I mean, this was probably 7, 8,
2011
years ago.
Yeah, 2011
when you wrote those. So, man, that's good. Now, you've had a lot of experience in the joint environment, and obviously the job that you're in now, you're responsible for all of the enlisted service members across all of the military services, to include the Coast Guard, as well as perhaps in a few days the Space Force. But tell me what's different about leading in the joint environment than just within United States Air Force.
Well, you know, leadership is the same regardless of what you do. It's getting people to accomplish the mission in the simplest of terms. The difficult part is tailoring your leadership style to the culture of each service. So you have to have an understanding on how they think and what makes them react to the orders placed upon them. And I think that any leader that takes the time to understand other service cultures outside of any computer, joint PME program, I think that they will be wildly successful if they are placed in a position of responsibility that includes soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marine, and Coast Guardsmen.
Yeah. What would you tell? Well, first let me ask this: do you think you? So what do you got in now? I'm almost at 31. You're about 30 years in.
29 years.
29. Okay.
10 days ago.
Yeah. Is the Air Force different?
Yeah, we didn't have internet when I first came in. It's different. But the funny thing is that the graybeards back in the day used to look at us and say, "Hey, you guys don't understand how it used to be." Back in the day.
Yeah.
What's the thing? Well, back in the day, so it's going to be constant.
Right.
There's always going to be new developments, new technology. The culture of our people is going to continue to change with the times. So we just got to remain flexible to be able to make the mission work.
Yeah. I think one thing that's probably the same is we still recruit just like we did when you and I came in. We still recruit, highly motivated, innovative, creative people that have high aspirations and want to do well. There's probably a lot of people who want to know, hey, man, what should I be doing now as a young airman, soldier, sailor, Marine, Coast Guardsman, if I wanted to follow in your footsteps? Like, what are the things that they should be doing that will ultimately lead to success?
Well, walking in footsteps, I much rather like to have people blaze their own trail because credibility by proxy is seldom a reality. You don't become credible because you know somebody, you try to do the same thing that somebody else was doing. Mm-hmm. Once you put your own personal take into those actions, then that's really when you come to be the leader that others will desire to follow. But if I had to give them any advice, it would be to learn from the past, look at the place where they need to go early on. I was just having a conversation with a gunnery sergeant that has aspirations of being a sergeant major at some point. 12 years in service. So my advice was look at the next position that you're looking at filling, and that is that of a first sergeant. Then take some lessons learned from the past and start seeing what your strength and your weaknesses are. Then start charting a path, write it down on a notebook, and start flying, your plan. As you get to execute that plan, you're going to get to see that some things work, some fail, but use everything as a lesson learned, and then just keep on working forward. But always act on the expected rank and don't rest in your laurels because you are now, and he's 7.
Yeah.
And if I had to give advice for any airman out there, if you're a master sergeant right now, start looking at that little brown book and see what it says about being a senior master sergeant, and start acting in that fashion to go ahead and prove that you have the capabilities and the ability to be able to serve in that rank. Leave it no question that you are the best suited to do that.
Yeah. No, that's sage advice, man. This is a tough, very demanding job, requires a lot of travel. Prior to this, you were the senior enlisted leader for the command senior enlisted leader for AFRICOM, and I know that required a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of energy, a lot of travel. How do you stay resilient, man? How do you maintain balance, harmony, whatever you want to call it? How do you keep yourself together? How do you keep yourself sane?
Yeah, it's sanity. Yeah, that's I don't know about sanity. But I will tell you, and this is a discussion that I had with my wife, Janet, a few years ago. Because we were talking about, our the length of our marriage, how long we've been together. And two things always pop up when we're talking about, our life, and that is humility and humor.
Mm.
We have always been grounded people, never let anything, every assignment has been the same. I report to senior officer, receive the orders, and then execute those orders to the best of my abilities for the time that I'm there. Not looking forward, not looking backwards, but learning every day. And then when things go wrong, even on the battlefield with my fellow airmen, soldiers, sailors, and Marines at some time, humor was a saving grace to everything that we did. We always found something to laugh about, even in the worst of times. But if I needed to pass any advice to anyone how to stay resilient, those are two things that has helped me carry on with my life.
I've watched that in action, man. We've been in several classes, meetings, we spent a lot of time together, and you always find a way to make us laugh, especially when we're arguing and fussing and fighting about something. What about, do you have a morning routine, man? What do you do? One of the things that I've learned over the years is, if you can master the mornings, then you can, nothing can guarantee success, but you can at least put yourself on a path to be successful throughout the rest of the day. Tell me about your morning routine.
Well, so this is another conversation I have with my wife, that we have become the old folks now because we go to bed super early, but there's a reason for that. My day starts at 03:45. That's when the alarm clock goes off. I get up, pop a Red Bull, take some supplements, read my SIPRNet, catch up with the news that I missed the night before. By 05, I'm at the gym until 06:15. Come back, clean up, and then, by 7:15, I'm at the steps of the river entrance.
Mm-hmm.
And then the day goes on.
Yeah.
And then anything that happens throughout the day, it's just relative to the actions of that morning. If I do not PT, I'm cranky.
Yeah.
So I have to get my PT. It's just a habit that since I was a young airman, it's been ingrained in me. So if I don't do it, something is missing. But, it gives me the energies and the focus that I need to be able to function early in the morning.
Yeah. So you're here at the steps of the Pentagon 715, and you got a lot of energy and a lot of focus. What things do you want to focus on as the next SEAC? Like what issues do you want to tackle during your time?
So there are a lot of things that we need to get after in my conversation with the chairman, with General Milley. But global integration is a big piece.
Mm-hmm.
How we have the forces positioned to be able to react to any threat or to be able to attack. The National Defense Strategy line of effort number 2, building partnerships and attracting new partners, strengthening allies and attracting new partners.
Mm-hmm.
That is also a big focus because we know that we're not going to get after any conflict alone. We're going to have to rely on those partners. And then the third thing is working with our people and their families, looking at things that we can work with the services, with you and the MCPOM, Sergeant Major of the Marine Corps, and the Sergeant Major of the Army, on finding what has worked, what has not, and if it didn't work, what were the lessons learned so that we don't repeat that again. An example is the whole housing crisis, that we need to put our heads together to be able to get after those things. But the chairman is very, very critical about the way that we approach, care, and handle issues affecting the human capital, and that's where my focus is going to be, the people.
Yeah. That's good, man. I tell you what, I'm looking forward to it. I won't be here for the entirety of your tenure, but having worked together in the AFCENT theater when you were the AFCENT CCEL and I was in Afghanistan, and then for the past few years working together in this job has just been fantastic. So I'm really looking forward to seeing all the great things that you'll be doing for us. Hey, we got a part of the show where we like to take some questions from the audience. So I'm going to turn it over to Senior Master Sergeant Harry Bubba Kibbe, and he'll ask you a couple of questions from the field.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Chief. SEAC. AJ, who is one of our 12 OAYs, asked on Twitter, he'd like to know, what can we do at the junior enlisted levels to align programs and processes with the NDS?
So the first thing when you start talking about, junior NCOs aligning with the NDS, I think we need to peel that back a couple of steps closer to what their responsibilities are. I don't want junior NCOs to start getting so focused on the strategic aspect of things to where they're losing sight of their core duties and responsibilities. And the reality is that there's a lot of service members out there that are even struggling to follow the simple rules imposed on them. So as NCOs, I will expect them to make sure that they're the keepers of the standard, making sure that people are doing what they're supposed to be doing, obeying the rules and regulations and abiding by them, and most importantly, holding accountability to ensure that we have a disciplined force. If we do that, the NDS will play itself out.
Awesome. Perry asks kind of a similar question, and it's how early should NCOs start developing a strategic mindset?
I think knowledge is pretty much open at any time in your career. If I needed to recommend 2 books for them to read if they want to know about strategy, it's The Art of War, Sun Tzu, and also Clausewitz, learning about the art and science of strategy. The book is actually called On War. So read those 2 books. They can get a little bit dry at times, but just get past those few humps on the road, and you will come out with a pretty good understanding on what is it that it takes to create a strategy. But then I will urge them to go back to their units and start relating actions to what they read. There's nothing better than using education for action, not just knowledge. Nobody cares about hearing passages from Clausewitz's book. That's why I'm not quoting anything from it. But what I will tell you is that the actions taken based on what I learned from that has really helped me move along understanding the strategic realm.
Awesome. SEAC. Derek would like to know, what is your favorite or most rewarding assignment as a leader?
As a leader, I have to say AFRICOM. I got to learn so much in that theater. And I think a lot of people fall in the same pitfall I did, correlating, all right, we got terrorists, it's just like Central Command, which is not. You get to deal a lot with poverty. You get to deal a lot with corrupt governments. I mean, there's a whole government approach that is necessary to take care of the issues in Africa. But the one thing that I say it was most rewarding is my interaction with the African partners. A lot of them just needed a little bit of guidance to go ahead and be empowered. And I think that we were able to achieve that because Chief Wright was there during the initial stages of our relationship building with them. But if you were to see them then and you see them now, they have flourished, and even their chiefs of defense are empowering them more. They're creating positions for them, which is really a sign of success. If since we're on the subject, and for any young airmen out there listening, I will say that when you get into an assignment, don't take someone's playbook and start acting upon it. Look at what they did, and then go ahead and start developing what is it that the future needs. And that development of that particular playbook, your own playbook, it's got to have an end state, some actions that you want to see realized by the time you leave. And then you execute that plan. And then you use the people, not the feedback of those close to you, because there's going to be plenty of people blowing sunshine up your OCPs. But I will tell you, there's one of those things that makes Chief Wright laugh. I could have used some other choice words. But no, there's going to be plenty of people that are going to tell you, yes, you're doing well. But when I look at the Africans' faces right now and I see what they're doing, man, that tells me success. And that is really what I would like other people to be able to affect if they get put in positions of leadership.
Awesome.
But
Thank
that is
you.
why.
Thanks, Zach. This last one is a selfish question. It's from Harry, Big Head Kibbe. I've heard you mention it, and I know Chief Wright mentions that you were difficult as a young airman. Do you think that on occasion difficult airmen who aren't given up on make good leaders?
Well, I'm still difficult now. He will tell you.
And one more thing is how do you encourage those in leadership positions not to give up on difficult troops?
Well, I'll tell you some of the story for the sake of time, but I mean, getting in trouble at a young age, and the reason I'm here today is because one NCO decided to care for the issue. And I had two examples. One, my supervisor at the time that totally disregarded what happened, and then an outside agency NCO that actually took the time to go ahead and say, hey, what happened? Let me help you get back from this. And it was that one NCO that really gave me a plan to go ahead and be better than who I was at the time. When I finally became a tech sergeant and went through the NCO Academy, I ran into that NCO. And that NCO was a command chief at the time. And out of the blue, I saw her at the club at Maxwell, and we still had a club over there. Mm-hmm. And I ended up having her lunch with her and her husband, John, who was a civil engineer in the Air Force. And she was like a proud mom because she knew exactly how quick I had promoted, making up time for the stripe that I lost. She saw that I was doing something better with my life. She saw that I actually taken my energy and made use of it. And then when I finally became a Chief Master Sergeant, she was one of the first people to go ahead and say congratulations, and she told me, you see, Jack, what's the other word that we use for donkey? Yeah. She told me, I told you so. So again, if you fall on your face and pick yourself up, but realize that there's going to be somebody in there paying close attention to you. And if they give you advice to help, don't stay in the dumps, man. Don't stay in the basement. Yeah. Get out of there and freaking see the sunlight of the day because, man, every day will bring something different. So
thank you very much, SEAC. And thank you for submitting the questions. If you'd like to connect with SEAC, you can follow his Facebook page at SEAC.jcs or on Twitter and at the Joint Staff. He's also on Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Back to you, Chief Wright.
All right. Thanks, man. Hey, was there ever a time in your career growing up in the Air Force and in the joint world where you felt like giving up?
Yes. And most people will think during the pararescue pipeline, but no, that wasn't even a thought at the time. But I had a very challenging assignment at one point, and the assignment was challenging because at the speed that they were measuring progress was extremely slow. We had toxic leadership. We had senior NCOs that, for the most part, didn't care. There was a lot of self-serving going on at the time in that particular assignment. And at one point, I actually called my functional manager here at the Pentagon. I said, hey, I want out of active duty. Send me to the reserves over at Patrick. I'm done with this clown show. And he's like, hey, buddy, just hang in there. Look, these things happen. Just trust that somebody's got your back. And it is because I trusted that chief at the time that I decided to just go ahead and hold my ground. And, I'm glad I listened because things really did materialize. Yeah. But it was just a very, very difficult position.
Man, I tell you, there's lots of, and I'll just speak for airmen right now, but there are lots of airmen out in our Air Force who are in that same position now. And you mentioned toxic leadership. So that's been a huge topic of discussion, not just on social media, but as I travel around the world and get to speak to young airmen and NCOs face to face. They point to some of the resiliency challenges, the low morale, the suicide, and some of the other things. One of the key things that they say is toxic leadership. What advice would you give to a young airman or NCO who is dealing with, at least in their opinion, who has to deal with a toxic leadership environment? What do you do? How do you make it through something like that?
Well, I will tell them that it's all about accountability. If somebody's doing something wrong and they're that toxic, they got to be brought forward and be dealt with. I've always said it, you deserve what you tolerate. So if you let them keep doing that and making you feel belittled or, undervalued in your position, then you deserve it. Yeah. But if you decide to go ahead and stand up against them, and I'll say it in public right now in the podcast, you can always reach out to me at any time.
Yeah.
Ramon.colonlopez.mil at mail.mil. And if you have an issue and you want some advice, reach out to me, because the reason I'm here today is because one NCO took the time to go ahead and hear me out. And I will be ashamed if I didn't hear you out if you're having similar issues.
Yeah. Well, if your exec is listening, they better create another mailbox for you, because you'll certainly start getting those.
You speak from experience, right?
Yeah. What about, so there's a couple other parts of this equation that I would ask you to address. One is the person that's being a toxic leader, and let's not even bother with them, because they probably are the ones who have this. Most people who are toxic don't really know it. But what about the chiefs and the commanders and the folks that are responsible for making sure that you have the right leaders in the right place and rooting out any, I always get this word, toxicity. Yeah. What would you say to those folks who have the power to either make the toxic leader better or remove him from the organization?
Yeah, my message will be the same: accountability. I think a lot of the issues we have today regarding leadership is lack of accountability. Mm-hmm. I'm pretty sure that by that point, if you're talking about a wing command chief, a colonel, brigadier, they all know what the rules are. But often people turn the blind eye, either because that has been the norm for a while, that has been the culture of the organization, or clearly they just don't feel they have time to be dealing with that. And sometimes people shy from opening the proverbial can of worms because they got too much stuff to focus on. But my advice to them will be, if you're having problems with your people, you got to put everything else aside and focus on them, because without them, you will not get a damn thing done.
Yeah.
So pay close attention to your people and see what their needs are. And if they bring something forward, then act upon it and show them the results, that they're caring enough to go ahead and take care of the issues immediately.
Yeah. Hey, I got a question for you, CZ. So you literally are the poster child, like literally. Like I come through the airport and I see your poster. You literally are.
It wasn't by the FBI. But
no. Like you're the poster child for, what a service member, certainly an airman, should look like, should act like. And if not for you telling your story, most people would think, wow, man, this guy's, he's perfect. He's hardworking. He just gets after it. He's a machine. He wakes up at 3:45 in the morning. Tell us what you do for fun, though. Like, what are, besides making jokes about all the rest of us, what do you and Janet do on the weekends or when you have free time?
So, I'll start with Janet, because she just loves to make the home a home. She loves to cook, and that's part of our we time. We sit in the kitchen, we have a beer, she cooks, and then we say whether the meal was great or it sucked, which it never sucks, by the way. I'll say that on the record. And we love being outdoors.
Yeah.
Very outdoorsy people. We love hiking. I obviously have a passion for mountaineering and mountain biking. And she just loves being out there with me.
And she's a hunter. Like sometimes we'll be in a class. We were at Harvard, I think, in a class together.
Yeah.
And you showed me pictures of her. I don't know if she had killed a mountain lion or a bear or.
Yeah. By the time this is done, she's gonna kill a freaking Sasquatch. But no, she's an avid hunter, and that is also her passion. So she's very aesthetic when it comes to it. Every year during the rut, right around Halloween, she has her sabbatical where she goes for about 2.5 weeks, and she hunts during that time, and that is the time that is the respectful time of the year that you do not do anything with Janet.
Right.
She's
Wow.
out there hunting. But that passion, both of us understanding that, we love the outdoors and there's certain things that we like to do. Like she hates mountain biking, so she will not come out with me. And I just got out of the penalty box too, by the way, because I almost killed myself racing downhill. But we allow each other the time to do those kind of things, and but most of the time we're just spending time together. And then again, as you know, our time with them is very limited, so we maximize every opportunity that we get with them.
Yeah, good. You mentioned 2 books to the audience on things that you recommended them reading for strategy. What about you? What are you reading these days?
So right now I'm doing my second read of a book called Let the Word Go Forth.
Let the Word Go Forth, okay.
By Ted Sorensen, who was President Kennedy's speechwriter.
Okay.
So what this book is about is the speeches and his dialogue letters from 1947 to 1963. And the book was written in 1991. But I've been a disciple of Kennedy's philosophy when it comes to engaging people in public speaking, writing, and so on. So I've always been studying the way that he did things. But that book, the reason I'm reading it for a second time now is because there's always a good leadership nugget in there in between the key words, beyond the do not ask what a country can do for you, the typical ones that people hear. But Let the Word Go Forth is one of those books to where people will find value.
Yeah. So I think you got sworn in on Friday. You took your first trip on Saturday to the Army-Navy game. What about your first big trip beyond that? Where you going first? Who are the first service members you're going to go visit?
So the next big engagement that we have going on is the beginning of the year, and that is a USO tour. So we're going to go out overseas to different places to go ahead and engage with all of the forces and some of our international partners. And then after that, one of my main priorities is going to be to engage the professional military education academies from all of the services.
Okay.
And part of that is that cultural learning to see where they are today and see what is it that we can learn from each other, not only for our U.S. personnel, but also building those partnerships with our allies. And then after that, we have some total force engagements with the National Guard, our Coast Guardsmen, and then a trip out to the Pacific.
Yeah. True CZ fashion, you're a man that's got your priorities together, man.
Man. Yeah, it's going to be, I'm telling you that we're heading out to the Pacific, and we definitely want to go ahead and hit everything while we're over there, because I know that time is going to be limited, but we're working through that right now. And then, we have engagements with the chairman to where we need access to certain places, and he's very inclusive. He's very empowering. He's if you're with me, you're going to be by my side. And he's also of the mindset that there's nothing between he and I.
Yeah.
He's like, if you need something from me, you come direct to me. Nobody in the staff will stop you, and you do whatever you need to do.
I tell you what, man, that makes a huge difference. I have a very empowering boss just like that.
Yes.
So, again, looking forward to all the great things. You mentioned that time is limited, so it's also limited for us. But I couldn't allow you to leave, man, without telling us of all of the things that's happening in the world. Lots of challenging stuff for us as leaders in the United States military. What keeps you up at night, brother?
Well, getting up at 3:45 in the morning, nothing keeps me up at night. By 8 o'clock, I'm zonked out.
Yeah.
But something that is heavy on my heart and the back of my mind is our posture when it comes to helping people with traumatic issues, brain issues, psychological issues. And I go back to the conversation with Chief Roy at the time, that he was concerned about the well-being of the force. And we're starting to see it, to see it right now. If you look at some of these young men and women, they have been getting after it for some of them over 15 years, going back and forth, people in their 20th deployment. And that's going to take a toll because it's not natural. And when you're exposed to that much violence over a period of time, something is bound to go wrong.
Yeah.
And I definitely want to work with the services, with industry, and also with our allied partners to get to the best possible course of action to take care of them and make sure that that care doesn't stop when they leave service, that there's also some additional care once they depart, whether it's the VA or other agencies, to be able to go ahead and help them out. But that is one thing that is heavy on my mind.
Yeah, no, man, I appreciate it. I can tell you, for the audience out there, we definitely hit the lottery with SEAC number 4, man. So thanks for all the stuff that you've been doing all throughout your career, and I look forward to just watching you, man. I'm just gonna sit back and watch you work. I will give you one last opportunity, man, to any message that you want to leave to the team about leadership or life or any topic of your choice.
Well, talking about the Ted Sorensen book, I actually have a quote that I wrote in my book back, a few months back, and I would like to share that with you.
Yeah.
And this is from the president's inaugural speech, and the passage is called "Let the Word Go Forth," and it says, "Let the word go forth from this time and place to friend and foe alike, that the torch has been passed to a new generation of Americans, born this century, tempered by war, disciplined by hard and bitter peace, proud of our ancient heritage and unwilling to witness or permit the slow undoing of those human rights to which this nation has always been committed and to which we're committed today at home and around the world." Then he continues to say, "Let every nation know, whether it wishes us well or ill, that we shall pay any price, bear any burden, meet any hardship, support any friend, oppose any foe, to assure the survival and success of liberty." When you read those words, and this is decades and decades ago, they still relate to every single one of us as Americans today. And if you're looking for a purpose to serve, just pay close attention to the words of the people that laid the path for us, whether it's in space or in the battlefield. We have a lot of role models and a lot of good lessons learned in our history. So keep getting educated, keep getting smart, but most importantly, take action when you get after it.
Yeah, thanks, man. You certainly have laid the path and the foundation for many of us and many airmen and service members alike that'll come up behind you. So thanks again for what you do. Well, that wraps up this session, ladies and gentlemen. But before I go, let's take a minute to thank, of course, our guest for today, SEAC number 4, CZ Colon Lopez. I also want to say thanks to all the folks who submitted questions through the various social media outlets. Our team from SAF-PA, Mr. Tony Young, Juan Femuth, Sergeant Walton, Sergeant Shinzato, and my big giant-headed PA advisor, Senior Master Sergeant Harry Bubba Kibbe. And lastly, thank you to all the current and future leaders out there for listening in and for being on the front lines and taking care of your teams. If you'd like to find out more, check with us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. This has been your Blueprint Leadership Podcast. Thanks for listening, and remember, if better is possible, good is never enough, and you are your greatest competition.
Hey, what's up, man? How can I help you? Have a good night. Hey, smells great. Good morning, how can I help you? Which I think is ironic. Night.
More importantly, he knew what he was.
Morning. Yeah, right. Good night.
I just want to let you know Airman Miller took his life last night. Please let me know if you need anything.
So our operators are obviously the best in the world today, but they interface with their satellites, some of which can be 22,000 miles above the Earth's equator, through a computer screen, and it's frequently a text-based computer screen. So it's hard for them to envision the battle space within which their satellites operate. So using the tools like virtual reality, they can put themselves in that battle space, sitting on the very satellite that they're controlling, and then they can turn as they wish and look at where other satellites are relative to them, and then they can start to ask questions like, what is that other satellite doing? Why is it so close to me? What should I do in response to that? And it gives us an intuitive feel for the battle space that we've really been challenged to create for our operators when dealing just through a text computer screen. What are those things causing problems for our space operators that we can find rapid development opportunities to solve? And so here at Catalyst Campus, we've created a partnership with the Air Force Research Laboratory, the Space and Missile Systems Center, with our CDDs, and then private industry to rapidly solve these operator pain points. And so we were here getting a demo of one of those today.
The culture is definitely shifting. We're going from being a sort of very conservative field to a very progressive field. We're trying out ideas and running with them whether they work or not, which is incredibly exciting. And it's just very exciting to be a part of right now. No idea what it's going to look like in the future, but in regards to being a part of shaping and molding what that's going to be, it's been a blast. It's been a lot of fun, and I am optimistic. And I encourage if people are interested in space, run with it. There's a lot of good stuff here, and there's a lot of good work to be done for the future. It's definitely at a defining transitioning point.
Hey there everyone, I'm Senior Airman Angelo Rosario with your look around the Air Force. Secretary of the Air Force Barbara Barrett officially redesignated the 14th Air Force as Space Operations Command, or SPOC, following the signing of the 2020 National Defense Authorization Act. The act established the United States Space Force as the 6th branch of the Armed Forces. Air Force military and civilian personnel previously assigned to the 14th Air Force are now assigned to Space Operations Command. The Space Operations Command directly supports the U.S. Space Force's mission to protect the interests of the United States in space, deter aggression in, from, and to space, and conduct space operations. Air Force Global Strike Command named its newest helicopter Grey Wolf at a naming ceremony at Duke Field on December 19th. The MH-193A helicopter, or Grey Wolf, gets its name from the wild species that roams the northern tier of North America, the same area where Global Strike Command has Intercontinental Ballistic Missile, or ICBM, bases. The new helicopters will provide security and support for the nation's ICBM fields in Wyoming, Montana, and others. The Grey Wolf will close the capability gaps of its predecessor in speed, range, payload, and more. The Air Force is asking airmen and civilians across the service for theme ideas to celebrate its 75th anniversary on September 18, 2022. Every year, the Department of the Air Force dedicates a theme to celebrate the Air Force's birthday. Concepts for the 75th birthday theme should consider multi-domain operations, capture airmen's innovation, and reflect the Air Force's heritage over the last 75 years. Themes should be short, concise, catchy, and memorable. All submissions and voting will take place at www.ideascale.com, and the winner will be announced in April of this year. Check out af.mil for more information, including submission details and the grand prize. And that's your look around the Air Force.